have been a lot of shifts in the EV market over the past few months, both in sales and in perceptions. But the fact remains that EVs will play a significant role in the future of transportation energy. We're going to separate some of the news from some of the hype and some of all the other stuff going on and take a look at what retailers need to look at as we sit here in May 2025. Joining us for our conversation today is Quincy Lee. He is founder and CEO of Electric Era. And while Quincy hasn't been on the show before, we've talked about Electric Era. We had Plaid Pantry on a few months ago to talk about some of the things they're doing with Electric Era. So great to have you on this time, Quincy.
Yeah, Jeff, it's good to see you again and good to be here with you. I'm excited to talk with you today about all things EVs.
So before we get into EVs, just give us the elevator pitch on Electric Era, what you guys do, which kind of sets up how you're the expert in this area.
Yeah, great question. So our company specializes in helping fueling retailers modernize and electrify their car refill offerings for the 21st century driver. We build a full EV fast charging station, including all hardware, software, and services that allows fueling retailers to quickly and profitably electrify. So think of our product as a full EV fast charging station that drops down into your parking lot with little hassle. We take care of everything. And we've begun scaling across the country with many fueling retailers. Some of our customers include Costco, Love's, Giant Eagle, Plaid Pantry, SpaceX Fuels, and more. So we're excited to be here and talk all things EVs.
So EVs have been in the news, as I mentioned. Tesla, disappointing sales. Other companies in China, very encouraging sales. Will EV sales hit all these targets? There's all kinds of things with tariffs that may also affect that. But what is the baseline trend that retailers need to look at? Or what are the potential opportunities that retailers can take advantage of in EVs as there's a continual shift in the market? What are some certainties that they can take to the bank as they look at EVs as a potential revenue source or just customer service?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a former SpaceX engineer, so I always look at the numbers and the data and try to get past the headlines. And what I do is I look at Kelley Blue Book's reporting on this every quarter. Last quarter, Kelley Blue Books showed 300,000 new electric vehicles were sold in the first quarter of 2025. So 300,000 new drivers went electric. And there's even more actually in the used EV car market that's not in that number. The used EV car market is like exploding, actually. There was a 69% year-over-year growth rate from 2023 to 2024 in used EV sales. So the point for your audience, I think, is just that there's tons of drivers all over America deciding that they like electric, and that they're going to make that transition and make it part of their lifestyle. And I think that's an interesting data point, and it really means that there's a new class of drivers that have a similar but slightly different set of needs when they're looking for convenience. Drivers, have a slightly longer dwell time. EV drivers have a slightly longer dwell time, and they're going to look for slightly longer dwell time amenities and convenience when they stop to charge. And I actually think this pairs really well with the broader shift towards hot foods in the convenience store industry, because hot foods take a little bit longer to eat. It doesn't, hot food doesn't really pass the cup holder test. You can't really drive away with it. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that you have drivers out there looking for that type of amenity. It's a little bit longer. They're going to be in your store a little bit longer. It's an opportunity to capture new share of wallet. And that's what we see from, and hear from our customers and prospective customers across the country. Businesses are planning for this new driver base. It's here to stay. It's growing quite quickly. And I think it'll be a continuous part of the future of fuel retail.
So you look at fuel retailing 100 years ago. you can argue when the first gas station was. I think most people, myself included, say Pittsburgh, 1913, a little bit more than 110 years ago. Uh, Before that first station, people had just kind of shacks on the side of the road. They pour fuel in. It was very less than unregulated. It was just there were so many things going on. Then there were a couple 100,000 of these side of the road things, roadside fueling, and then it evolved, and it evolved to what you see today: modern fueling, canopies, um, marketing at the pump, etc. It took 110 years to get there. It won't take 110 years with EVs, but what are some of the things that you are seeing, or what you think will happen in terms of EV sales, that or EV how EV charging can be used from the standpoint of retailers? Because retailers think, okay, or the retail model is there's fuel, I'll sell a certain volume, I'll make a certain profit per gallon, and maybe they go inside the store. With, as you mentioned, with EVs, there's a little bit longer dwell time. It allows people to get food service. Um, but the other thing with EVs is traditionally the EV charging units have been placed where they're less than convenient. There's no canopy, so to a certain extent, we are treating EV charging customers as if we generally as if they are not that important, and you really got to treat them as important if you want to make that a revenue source. So that's a long introduction to the question of what are the changes that we see, that you see, that will make EV charging look different than it does now and make it more attractive to both customers and to EV charger providers.
Yeah, I think you started off the introduction highlighting the kind of historical nature of change of the convenience industry. And you're right, it really has adopted and modernized well many different times over the last 110 years. I'm also a Pittsburgh 1913 loyalist. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of when I identify. I actually recently looked up the history of this industry, and that's what I found too. And over the last 110 years, it's gone from a maintenance driven industry to a fueling driven industry. Now it's really about foods, and now it's again modernizing for EV. Um, and I love that spirit of adaptability. I think the retailers, the fuel retailers of America are super adaptable. They're super smart. They're going to provide whatever the driver needs. And I think that's the framing to go into this next platform shift is the driver is different. They have a slightly different set of needs. Asking yourself what that need set is so that you can grab more share of wallet from this new type of driver is a super productive and healthy exercise for those forward thinking C-store owners in the audience. I think the big headline is, and framing that's helpful for everybody is this is more than a charging station. It's if done right, it's a new commerce platform in your parking lot. It's a new way to grab people into your loyalty programs. It's a new way to increase retention. It's a new way to increase average basket of goods size. It's a new way to increase pump to store conversion. But the key thing is it has to be done right. And so that's kind of where, we take the framing that this is more than a charging station. And we, of course, want to start by providing very reliable, high uptime, uh, seamless charging experiences, but use that as a wedge to get drivers comfortable, to have them have a great customer experience so they come back again and again and again. And when the driver is there, forward-thinking convenience store and retail fueling retailers can use the screen as a way to proposition the driver base with materials that and content that allow them to spend more time at your store. One example of this is just using the screen technology to get people enrolled in your loyalty program, or if they're already enrolled, surfacing promotions and discounts and offerings to the person to get them inside the store. The EV industry has been this check the box type thing for 4 to 5 years, but we're really honestly genuinely seeing a huge shift away from that. I think the forward-thinking fueling retailers that we talk to are now thinking of it more of a way to differentiate themselves, to delight and wow the customer, to create a unique and novel brand experience that causes that EV driver to move away from a Tesla charging station to, a convenience store charging station. But you have to, as you said, very intelligently and discerningly, you have to think about the driver, think about their unique needs, and not push them off to the edge, but rather welcome them, and bring them into your store in a way that delights them and wows them, starting with that kind of core thesis of what is the thing that they want. They're there for longer. They're going to want to go inside the store if you have offerings that are attractive to them. But if you don't, they're not. So it's a two-sided equation. You got to get both sides well to capture this new audience.
So you had mentioned the screens, and when you think about somebody with an EV, or really somebody with any car, there's three types of screens. You have the screen of your phone, which most people are attached to. You have the screen on a car, which modern cars, some of those screens are pretty decent sized. And then you have the screen related to the charger. Is there more of a consolidation of screens or a linking of screens that will be happening that will allow retailers to take advantage of how do they talk to customers and say, hey, you're going to be here for 8.5 minutes. Why don't we make this sandwich for you and bring it to you curbside, or whatever the offer is? How do we combine some of these screens that right now or used to operate as three disparate units?
Yeah, I think it's hard to get into the infotainment screen, the screen inside the car, the content that you want. It's easy to get content on the charging screen and into the app, the content that you want. Linking those two screens is really easy for a company like Electric Era. So if you have an existing app and an existing loyalty program, and you want to link the driver experience that you're having in there with the driver experience that it welcomes them when they show up, that's really seamless and easy to do. And that's where we like to play. Our systems are able to kind of link those two together, and surface things like points and rewards for charging, personalized in-store offerings during charging, tier charging benefits. If you have a paid or subscribed audience, they can unlock exclusive offerings. They can feel like they're leaving money on the table if they don't go and subscribe to your premium tier. We can get, the insights from the screen into the app so that there's a seamless experience. One example of that is we can surface the charging insights inside the app. So that way, when they're in the store, they can click on the app, open it up, and see where their state of charge is, how much energy they've consumed, how long they have before they're done charging. And then while they're in there, of course, they're looking at your other offerings. So tying that all together in a really seamless way is key. And I think the charger really does play an important part. And I think a simple framing is, imagine yourself, you show up to a charging station and you tap your credit card or you start to pay with the app. It takes about 20 seconds for the charging session to initiate, and drivers are really habituated to stare at the screen for those 20 seconds. They're locked in. We talk to marketers from all the big box retailers, and they are in love with this idea because they're like, wow, this is great. You're taking away their car for 20 minutes and they're locked into a screen at least for 20 to 30 seconds, if not longer. What a great way to surface content to them that drives in-store conversion, basket of goods size increase, loyalty program integrations, et cetera. And then again, when they're done charging, they're walking away. You kind of have this wave goodbye moment where you could surface another insight. Hey, thanks for coming. Thanks for charging with us. By the way, you're only 2 charges away from a free 20% discount off of our pizzas or our hot sandwiches or our drinks. So, kind of thinking through the customer flow as they arrive, they dwell, they leave. You realize there's all these offerings, all these opportunities to attract that driver base and get them into your brand, into your ecosystem.
And you mentioned the gamification element, which I think people really love now. It's just, oh wow, I'm that close to a pizza. I'm gonna come back here 2 more times and I'm gonna get my pizza.
I want that pizza. Give me that pizza.
Exactly.
People love that.
You had mentioned a couple different companies that you're currently working with. You Plaid Pantry, not they have a lot of stores, but not many with fueling or charging. But that you have you're working with them, and then on the other end, you're working with Love's, which is truck stop largely, and Costco, which is a big box. So three different formats.
Right.
Um, Less the customer, what the customer is, demographics, but what are the commonalities with what the customer wants in charging with those three very different charging places?
Yeah, I mean they all want to delight and wow the customer and build a loyal driver. That's the common theme. I think it's with current dwell times, it's um, that's the larger format, longer dwell time type offerings make a little bit more sense today. But it's really important to the audience to remember that charging times are basically increasing at 19% year over year growth rates. So in 5 years, it's going to be cars are going to be charging faster and faster and faster, right? And that means you kind of open up the faster format, lower dwell time um, locations in a pretty accelerated fashion as the cars continue to improve and as they get faster and faster in terms of charging. So whether you're a big box retailer, you're a truck stop, or you're a convenience store that specializes in 8 to 9 minute dwells, there's there's an opportunity to capture new share wallet from the EV driver community with the right set of strategies. Um, and I would encourage the audience to think about that EV driver. I mean, EV drivers, I think, get a bad rep. I think the perception has been, oh, this has been a government mandated thing. Nobody wants EVs. That's not true. I mean, EVs are awesome. They're really fun to drive. They're like they're like a rocket ship on wheels. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I used to build rocket ships, and I love speed and I love acceleration. That's what is attracting a lot of drivers into the EV. And also, they're just cheap. They're very affordable. Like the maintenance costs are super low. So you're seeing this like kind of uh, economical or adrenaline junkie buyer base attracted to that EV blend. So they're not going away. They're accelerating in terms of growth rates. They're going to be in your parking lot. You might as well serve them and make money off of them.
So you had mentioned your previous job twice. So I have to ask,
Oh,
like,
sorry.
when you're in a meeting and somebody says we can't do this, do you ever say, "Hey, this isn't rocket science," and I know? And does that just like shut down meetings? Do you ever use that line?
All the time. No.
Good.
So that's a good one. I should start using that. But yeah, I think the time that I spent at SpaceX, which was about 7 years, definitely informed my strategies for this company. We first and foremost just want to make excellent products that people love, that drivers love, that are affordable for our customers, and that solve the real world friction points of the industry. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, EVs will never work. There's not enough grid power." We solve that. We have a battery backed EV fast charging station. It's kind of like having a big gas tank underneath your gas pumps, but for batteries. That's our approach. We solve the grid problem. Other people will say, "Oh my gosh, the reliability and the uptime is so bad. These are hard to maintain and operate." We solve that problem. We have a vertically integrated software system that has achieved extremely high per port uptime. I think we're just behind Tesla in terms of per port uptime and session reliability. Drivers love our charging stations, and that's why we're getting demand from our customers. My point though is not to overstate the electric era part of this, but rather that we try to take a very calculated approach to solving the friction points to make adding EV fast charging to a retail location not just easy but profitable. Like that's the goal here. We really, in order to catalyze this industry, we have to turn EV charging not from a check the box type thing, but from I got to do this. This is important to the next 20 years of my business. I need to make money off of this. And here's a really easy way to do it.
So for those that want to learn more about the technology, we did cover it. Just go on, type Plaid Pantry. That there was a cool episode, just kind of walking through how you reduce the demand charges and all that with this new technology. not going to spend time talking about that here because we did, but it is really interesting. But when you look at why a retailer would want EVs, or what are the concerns and the opportunities, one would be the costs. That was something that you had just talked about. There's ways that the cost could be significantly reduced in terms of the cost of electricity, cost of equipment. That changes all the time, but hopefully coming down. The other two elements, there's revenue, and then there's the ancillary profits slash ecosystem. How do you get somebody coming to you instead of coming to somebody else? And you talked a little bit about that as well, but what are the revenue opportunities going forward with EVs? Right now, gas margins have crept up as demand has slightly decreased, but are there margin opportunities with EVs, and can those margin opportunities grow or shift over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think generally, I would say the overarching theme that we hear from fueling retailers reflects what's happening in liquid traditional fuel retailing, which is that there's lower margins at the pump, but really high margins inside the store. So when you're thinking through a strategy for EVs, that's probably going to be the reality that you find yourself in. There are opportunities to have fairly high sustainable profit margins by decreasing demand charges, and basically, buying energy from the utility at a lower price than you're selling it. I think that our solution uniquely solves that problem. But the real big opportunity is, what are you doing with that driver when they're there? This is your guys' business model. Everybody on the call knows this, right? And it's really just around, all you need to do really is just modernize that business model and that strategy of getting people in the store for this next generation of drivers. And that's where the bread and butter playbook comes in, with things like loyalty programs. There's new opportunities, though, that are a little bit not traditional, such as point of sale checkout, that you can do with, not to talk too much about our company, but our charging screen actually allows drivers to buy things on it from inside your store, getting them in there, guaranteed, right? So, figuring out how to increase retention and frequency, figuring out how to increase basket of goods size, and figuring out how to increase pump to store conversion rates. That's the playbook. Figuring that out for EVs, that's the big opportunity. And the fueling retailers that do that first will capture the early adopters, and you'll start to form habit loops with them. They're going to be looking for fueling retail services for their EV. They're going to be doing it across the street at your competitor or with you. And it depends on, the strategies you put into motion and when you put them into motion, which ultimately determines like how much share of wallet you'll grab over the next 20 to 30 years from this new cohort.
So we won't have you make predictions over the next 30 years. But 30 years, if somebody wants to check 30 years from now and say, what are your predictions? Great. But we're not going to do that. But you had mentioned sales pretty strong in the first quarter for EVs. What should retailers look at in terms of numbers or in trends in the coming months? As I said, there's a lot of things going on in the news. Things change every day. But is there something beyond sales that retailers might want to look at and say, oh, this is something that is perhaps more attractive for me to continue to look at?
Yeah. So I would lay it out in a couple of ways. I would say, look at, of course, the year over year growth rates. Look at which automotive companies are benefiting. Q1 was important, not just because it was a record quarter, but because GM had a huge quarter. GM, like a global American brand, they are all in on EVs. They're selling Chevy Equinoxes at a huge rate. Traditional automotive OEMs are in this. They're in it to win it. They're going after Tesla. So I would say look at that, and look at Ford and others as well along those lines. I would also say look at data around who's buying. You know, it's not just yuppies on the East Coast and the West Coast buying $150,000 EVs anymore. No, this is now a lower income type purchase, a middle American, a middle class American, and towards the lower class Americans who are starting to buy these cars again. They're now basically cheaper than ICE. That's actually happening now, and that would be probably another thing to keep an eye on is what's the average price of an EV and how does it compare to ICE. And at this point, you've basically got EVs more affordable, especially in the used car market. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because now there's a more cost conscientious cohort of drivers who are more inclined to purchase food from a convenience store purchasing EVs. So suddenly now it's a really good cross section of drivers with your core bread and butter business. Um, I would say those are kind of the constellation of things to pay attention to that ultimately matter to how to position yourself and how quickly to position yourself. And from my perspective, all of those point to now's the time. It's a great opportunity, especially if you're in a higher EV adoption state, to get the strategy rolling. And we're happy to help at Electric Era answering any questions you might have.
So, whether it's your chargers or anybody else's chargers, what do you find when you talk to somebody about charging, a retailer, and then you say, and then there's this opportunity, and the light bulb goes off,
Yeah.
and they say, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. That is a cool benefit." Are there one or two of those things that when people get walked through the idea of charging, that a light bulb comes on, right? Light bulbs don't really power vehicles, but anyway, the equivalent,
Yeah.
is there something like that where they just go, wow, that's interesting?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first is that it's easy to build the charging in your parking lot when you have a battery backed EV fast charging station. When people hear that, they say, "Oh, okay, I don't have to wait 5 years for a grid connection to build a high power fast charging station in my parking lot. I can build it in 6 months." That's really interesting. We also hear from retailers that they get really excited when they realize this is a new place to capture eyeballs and attention. It's a large EV fast charging screen. It's a large screen in your parking lot that has guaranteed lock-in for 20 to 30 seconds. In an industry where attention is, thousands of dollars per second with, ads, you have 30 seconds to basically do whatever you want with someone. And that's where the magic happens in terms of point of sale extension, buying things on the screen, loyalty program enrollments, personalized ads and marketing. All of those are tools in a tool chest to increase in-store revenues. And that's the magic of this. Like that's where people jump out of their chairs. They say, "Wow, that's so cool." Because that's your current business model. We're finally to the point with EV charging where we're back at the current fueling retail business model, which is in-store retail, loyalty program, driver retention, pump to store conversion rates, basket of good upsells. That's where we specialize, and I think that's the big opportunity that people should be paying attention to.
Do you have, I said, I'm not going to make you make predictions for 30 years from now, but let's just say it's the end of 2027, 2 years, well, mid 2027. I won't even make you go 2.5 years. Any predictions on what you think things will look like 2 years from now?
Yeah, and I think a good gut check is like, where are we at today? Well, last year, there was about 1.3 million vehicles purchased in America for about 5 million total. In 2027, there's going to be 10 million EVs on American roads in a low case, growing towards around 20 million EVs across America by 2030. So it's starting to get to be a pretty sizable percentage of the American fleet pretty quickly. And that's the advantage of compounding growth. Everybody knows about compounding interest, right? Put a nickel in your bank account, you make a bunch of money off of it, it turns into $100 in 20 years. That's what's happening with EVs. There's compounding growth happening. So I think the takeaway is that this is going to happen quickly and surprisingly fast. And if you get caught not paying attention, you might get left behind.
Well, Quincy, just from your name, I'll use that as our close. It sounds like we are in the electric era, or soon will be. So, sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for retailers who want to possibly take advantage of it. And time is now, or time is a year from now, or whenever you feel it fits. But we spent a lot of time talking about EVs on this program, whether it's the Transportation Energy Institute and what they're doing with their charging analytics. But we're spending that time because it is going to be a significant part of our future, and it is becoming a more significant part of our present. So thanks for joining us today, Quincy.
Pleasure to be here, Jeff, and thanks for your time, everyone.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.